Yeah, so today we have Phil Pelucha over Zoom, as per usual. He is the founder and CEO of Billionaires in Boxers. This was a podcast about podcasting. It's interesting. He has a total different perspective than most podcasters about generating income with their podcast. He uses his podcast network as a networking tool, basically, and creates business opportunities out of podcasting, or he uses podcasting basically as a way to communicate with possible business partners. He shared a lot about how he became successful in this world. So if you're into podcasting, check out this podcast. It's a meta podcast, and just hold on, because the guy's got a lot of energy. Like he blew me out of the water with his energy. So enjoy this one. So we are live today with Phil Pelucha. This is a podcast about podcasting. I guess it's a meta podcast. I don't know how else you could put it. So all you podcasters out there, I'm going to be able to pick Phil's brain today. From what I gathered in a short, my short little preparation for this podcast is that you do things a little differently than the other people, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but quite successful. So please, just without any further ado, let's jump right into it, man. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking the time.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. I think we're gonna have a lot of fun.
Yeah, having fun playing. We had these one guests on, and Rebecca. She's like, let's play, and I was like, she looks at it like playful. You know, when you have these conversations with people, and it's better to be like that than let's work, you know?
Oh, for sure. Like I have a saying that I use on a daily basis, which is your vibe attracts your tribe. So I like the idea of playing, because that's how you get to know who you want to do business with. That's how you get to know who you want to spend time with. So yeah, I have a lot of fun with this. In fact, we were talking off air, like over 10,000 hours of podcasting. And I have to be honest, I think 90% of those hours have been pretty energizing. Like you get off a podcast and you're pretty pumped up because you've had an electric conversation. So yeah, we're definitely gonna have fun. I have no doubt.
Yeah, my wife was talking about that the other day, because I just was kind of like, no, I think it was talking to my dad, because that's the first question you get as a podcaster, right? Like, so how much money do you make, and why, like, where's your money at? And like, you get that straight up, especially from people where like you're spending time, you built a studio, you're doing a thing, and like, so you make that much money? And I'm like, no. I mean, I don't. Maybe you can fix that for me. You can tell me how.
Sure, we can.
But yeah, but like the thing about it for me is, like you said, like I get so much when I have a great conversation with somebody. I feel like I should almost be paying them. Like I have such a great time with some of these people, and I learn so much, and especially doctors, and they're writing books and doing things that I wish that I would like to do. I look up to these people that I'm talking to, so I get a lot of that. I get so much emotionally from these people. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we'll get into this in more detail as we go through, but one of the things that I always say is that the power of podcasting is not in the audience, it's in the networking. And you've just touched on it right there, right? The reason that only 10% of podcasters will ever make any money from podcasting is because they try and run it like a radio or TV show. And a radio station or a TV station to make money needs a large audience, so you can sell sponsorship, and you can sell advertising, and you can sell merchandise, and you can do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the reality is that it's actually like a VIP backstage pass to your industry, because the people who won't give you 5 to 10 minutes on the phone, or worse still, like if you were to contact a certain coach or a certain professional and say, hey, can we have an hour on the phone? They'd be like, yeah, sure, here's my invoice. Right? Yeah. Whereas on a podcast, they do that for free, and it's a one-on-one mentorship session. So you get to learn from the best people giving their best selves, and it's all done via a trade, because instead of trading cash for time, you're trading an audience and a platform for time. You're saying, come on and tell people who you are and what you're all about. Yeah. And in return, I'm going to learn from you. And as a host, I'm going to extract those golden nuggets. So, I mean, I'll talk to you about how that works for business and all that kind of stuff, but it's even just that shift of mindset change will change how you run your podcast. Because if your focus is on, I need to grow an audience to sell sponsorship or advertising, the people that you bring on are always aimed at how you're going to get a bigger and better audience.
Yeah.
Whereas if your focus is, it doesn't matter if anyone's ever listening to this podcast because I'm growing, learning, and earning from this, you'll treat it completely differently.
Yeah, but I have like this thing of, I was trying to do it in German too. I know you've probably seen that I've done German and English, and
I have.
I checked out this other podcast, like a platform for podcasters to help you, and it was very, very marketing. Like all the people there, were all just marketing guys, and I kind of want to have. I don't really want to talk about marketing all the time, even though that's the instrument. No. Yeah, it's just.
Well, I'm not a marketeer. I mean, that's one of the I'm so with you, and that was exactly why we do what we do, right? It's also why we're ranked number one for what we do, without trying to give those guys a bit of a dig in the ribs. But the reason that we're ranked so well for what we do is that I am not a marketeer. I'm not a publicist. I don't come at it from that route. I'm a qualified surveyor. I come at this from a business perspective. I like to look at a giant building or a huge, impressive stadium, and instead of seeing this, great masterpiece, I see X amount of bricks times this amount of glass times this amount of man hours equals this.
Okay.
And that's how I like to do business. So I always start with a blueprint and a roadmap, and usually not that far away. It's kind of what's the big goal, and then where do we want to be in 12 months, and then we'll kind of reverse engineer it from there. But a lot of these people who help with marketing, it's like they understand their bit and their bit only, but because they don't really understand business. I mean, anyone who's ever worked with marketing agencies or PR agencies will tell you that they're some of the worst run businesses they will ever come across, because they understand a function and they're very good at that function, but the wider world of how business worlds often eludes them. And that's why I have conversations with people all the time, and they're like, can you generate leads from podcasting? And it's like, yeah, of course you can. It's like, well, how do I generate leads from podcasting? And it's like, well, before I even start telling you that, let's make sure that you're attracting the right type of leads, and the leads that you're getting in and the ones that are actually going to get you to that end goal. Because that's a piece that most of those lead generation services miss off entirely, right? It's like, I can get you 20 new leads a month. And it's like, yeah, but you're not doing any work to establish whether they're the right leads for the business. You're just taking their criteria and implementing them and hoping for the best. And that's a dangerous strategy, because people don't know what they don't know. So if they're aiming at the wrong people, now they're just paying somebody else's service to continue to aim at those wrong people. It's just perpetuating the wrong behavior even more.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like, I mean, if I had pressure to make money, it would change also. It would change it changes the. And sometimes it's like pressure to make money is good too. Sometimes having that pressure to like do something and make something out of it makes you kind of, but the best podcasts out there that I listen to, my favorite podcasts, and I haven't checked yours out yet, so I'm going to check it out and kind of, build my opinion on it. But it's kind of good that I haven't, so then I can just, I just get to know you first, and then.
Agreed.
But yeah, like when I listen to these Tim Ferriss, right? Joe Rogan, obviously. And I just, this other one that I showed you today, Eric, what was that one? It was from Hidden Forces. I don't know.
I've not come across that one.
Yeah. And you just see like, God.
It's hidden.
It's hidden. It's a hidden, yeah. It's literally hidden. But
it's a hidden force.
And it's amazing how hidden even Joe Rogan can be. For me, it's like, how could that? But I didn't listen to Joe Rogan for 2 years. For the last 2 years, I've been listening to them. But he's been on for 10 years,
Yeah.
And he's got one of these, and he's like the king of podcasts, and he's got so many, and it's like, but people don't even know who he is. So there's just this. I'm touching on a couple of things where when I got started into it, you kind of copy and create and start your own thing. And I like this format. So I'm like, well, that's how I'm going to do my show too. And obviously there's so many mistakes in that, right? Like trying to copy someone that's established comedian. He has his own, he brings his fan base with him. There's a whole different thing going on there,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and Joe's a great example of that actually, because, how many people do you think Spotify are going to pay a couple of $100 million to for their podcast?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that was their swan song, right? That was to get people's attention and start using Spotify more for podcasting. But that's not the norm. Like, that's not how it's going to be for most people. And I think what that's led to is people going, wow, look how much money there is in podcasting. And people are now trying to do the whole sponsorship, advertising. But, you know, Joe's had a successful career as a fighter and as a comedian before he did this. So he's brought his own audience with him, as you quite rightly said. So, you know, for me, I've been both sides of this, right? So I've grown and sold 2 podcasting networks that were sold off the back of the size of the audience. So I get monetizing the audience. I get what that can do. But actually, what we do today is far more successful. And that's, you know, we don't monetize the audience at all. I mean, not really. I mean, occasionally we do sales with the audience, but I don't like sponsorship and I don't like advertising. I won't do it.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah.
I just won't touch it. I've been there, done that, and I didn't like the influence that they had. I didn't like the fact that they could kibosh some shows and say, well, you know, we want to talk about business and you've just done a podcast on spirituality. That's no interest to us, so don't show it with our brand. Oh. It's like, it's my podcast. Like, you don't get to say what I do and don't do. And then you realize, actually, they do because they're paying you.
Yeah.
Then there's the fact that if they ever let you down or let your audience down, that's a reflection of you. They remember that it was you that introduced them to that brand that let them down or under-delivered. And for so many reasons, I just don't like that. But, you know, we make millions of dollars a year off what we do without trying to put too fine a point in it. I grew and sold 2 professional agencies using podcasting.
Interesting.
And when I say grew and sold them, I literally mean the clients that we worked with, I met on a podcast. The investors who bought them, I met on a podcast. So I literally grew and sold it using podcasting.
Literally, so literally in the conversation. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yes. So it's literally about the power of the network, right? It is you know, I always say business is a team sport, and you can be really good at your bit, but one of the mistakes a lot of entrepreneurs will make, especially when they first start, is trying to wear too many hats. They try and do the whole thing themselves. And what you realize is that business is so much more fun and productive and successful, and it can grow so much faster when you just say, no, I'm a striker. I'm going to stand up here and score the goals, but I need to surround myself with wingers who can put the ball in and midfielders who can win the ball back and control midfield possession and defenders who can go and do that bit and a good goalkeeper. I'm not going to try and be the whole 11-man team myself. I'm just going to be my bit. So who do I have already? Who do I need to upgrade? And who do I not have in my squad and my team at all that I need to go and identify? And that's how it's how I use, and it's how I teach others to use podcasting. It's the network. It's let's go and meet these people internationally. Let's focus on globalization, and let's make sure that you're collaborating and working with the teammates that can help you win a title.
Yeah, and so obviously you have to be general in that sense, right? Because every podcast has its own goal, right? And you mentioned that, like, so what's the goal of the podcast, right? Like, what are you doing? What's is it just altruistic? I'm just sitting here, I just want to have great conversations with people, and you know, but or am I, you know, like am I sharing? If I have a general interest in, or if I even better, I have a specific interest in my guest. Like we talked about love with this Dr. Christian Heim.
I heard that. I listened to that episode.
God, that was for me like such a great, like that was one of those conversations. It's just we just totally got on this wavelength, you know.
Well, I use the word love a lot in what I do because I'm a big believer if you don't love what you do, you'll never get the best out of who you are and what you're all about. Yeah. So, like taking the lessons that he taught, like and not using that word flippantly. I love what we do and I love who we do it for. And the second I stop loving it, I will stop doing it.
Yeah.
Because that's how you get the best out of people, right?
Yeah.
But it's also how you can identify, you know, who you should and shouldn't be working with. Because if the feeling is wrong, if you're not vibrating with somebody, then just don't do it. I mean, we've all worked with those clients that we really wish we hadn't bothered, the ones that ended up giving you a massive headache and you're like, oh, if I could go back in time. Yeah. And, you know, a lot of that comes down to you made a logical decision. Logically, they want and could need your services, and logically, you quite like the fact that they're going to pay you money for it. But you suppress the feelings of it. You suppress the fact that it didn't feel right, and actually you tolerated that person because they were going to pay your invoice, but you didn't really like them all that much. And when you kind of realize that, actually, as scary as that sounds, I mean, especially if you've got no clients right now and you're going to start saying no to people, that seems really scary. But it's the best thing you can ever do for your business, because if you're not going to respect your time, you can't ever expect anybody else to.
Yeah, saying no is a tricky one. That's in general, God, that's such a discipline.
Maybe I just got used to it.
Yeah.
I say no more than I say yes, and that's not as like a disrespectful thing. That's as a, I'm building a platform based off wanting to work with current and future industry leaders. So if you're not a current or future industry leader, I'll help you and I'll get you to a certain point. But at a certain point, when you say, "Great, can I move on to that next stage?" I'm going to say no. I'm going to say I don't see it. Like, I'm not feeling it. I'm not vibrating. Here's an introduction to somebody else who can take you on that next chapter of your journey, but it's not going to be me.
That's interesting. And you do that with podcasting. So you're having conversations, and you have I mean, we're talking about growing a podcast right now, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of meta for me, right? Because but I guess I'm trying to, like, the why. The why is where I'm looking. Like, why are we doing this? What are we reaching together? Where's our common goals? Where do we just have to find them through conversations and just kind of getting to know each other? And you just figure out, like, okay, this is going to fit. This is not going to fit. But
it's a good question.
Yeah.
My honest answer is, I think there's probably two stages to that. I mean, the first one is, if you know where you're trying to get to in life or in business, then it's relatively easy, because you just start to see whether, the guests that you invite on are to help you achieve that goal, right? So I'll share mine with you, because then we can give you a really tangible option, a tangible example, I should say. We do around 250 hours worth of business content for 15 plus satellite television networks globally at the moment. We could do far more than that. But for me, my big goal is that I want Billionaires in Boxers to become the most recognized business broadcast network globally.
Yeah.
That's my goal. Yeah. So for me, it's all about introducing people to my network and adding people to my network that are either going to be helping me to do that in terms of the actual skill set. We do a lot with the investment community. There's a reason that we have access to, over $1 billion worth of investment funds right now. It's because that stuff's expensive. It's going to need money, right? Yeah. I like working with the emerging markets. So working with businesses who are also trying to work in those emerging markets, or indeed who are in those emerging markets looking out and trying to go to NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange or whatever. Like, I'm constantly adding those people to my business. But at the same time, I have to look at that from a personal level. So me leading the business at the size it is now requires a certain skill set. And I'd like to think I have that skill set. Me leading this business as the world's sort of leading business broadcast network for what we do is going to require a different skill set. I'm going to need to learn new things. And that's a mixture of, probably three things. Health and wellness is definitely a big one. Managerial and leadership stuff is another one. And even in terms of learning more about the world of business, so that I can keep upping my game. But then the final ingredient for that is spirituality. So I'm a big believer in making intuitive decisions rather than making logical decisions. So if I'm ever not sure what to do about something, I'll go and meditate on it and see which feels best, and then I'll go with the one that feels best. Yeah. I don't have to explain it to anybody. I just make the decision and do it. But those are three areas of my life that I'm constantly trying to improve and train and get to that next level, so that I have the tools that I need when I get to that next level with my business and with the broadcasting network. Yeah. So I kind of take everything into consideration and look at kind of three options. Can I make money with you? Can I learn from you? Or do I want access to your network? If the answer is no to those three things, we're probably not going to have a conversation.
Yeah, but
if the answer is yes to at least one of those three things, we're going to have a conversation. But that doesn't mean I'm going to work with you. Yeah. That means I can see that there's a potential here. So we're going to have a conversation and see whether we vibrate together. I might just learn a lesson from you. I might get an introduction from you. I might get a client referral from you. Yeah. Or we might vibe so much that we go, no, this isn't a short-term thing. This is we're going to stick together and keep doing this. And it's the amount of times we hear the phrase, I like you, we should do business together. And then you map out how you're going to do the business, rather than kind of here's my service, do you want it? It's such an authentic and organic way of doing business. And, I say at the moment, we've got employees all over the world, but I'd say I have about 16 in my core team at the moment. These 16 people who I'm very, very close with. Every single one of them asked to join Billionaires in Boxers, not the other way around. I didn't find them and say, hey, I'd like to offer you a job. They either heard on a podcast, or I interviewed them, or they were introduced by somebody that I know, and they said, we love what you're doing. How can we get involved? And that for me allowed me to grow a team of people who are just as passionate about what we do as I am. And that for me is invaluable.
That's also, you have this energy about you, it's contagious. It's
Thank you.
Yeah,
it's called ADHD.
Yeah.
But you know what? In all seriousness, it is nice kind of being able to drive that energy towards something. And like I'm one of these people that, if you tell me I can't do something, I'm going to do it just to kind of spite you. But I also I don't really understand my limitations. Like the way that I'd liken this is that we're all born equal, right? It doesn't matter whether you were born into a super rich, wealthy family that have all the power, or whether you were born into the poorest of communities and have had nothing. Like we've all got the same unlimited amount of potential. We've got the same access to create, whether that's God, the creator, the universe, whatever. We've all got the same tools to be able to do that. Just some people use them differently. So when I meet people, like I meet very successful people on a daily basis. We have a number of billionaires who are actually within our network. And one of the things that's always fascinated me about them is don't get me wrong, they know more than I do. They know more than I do about certain aspects, right? And I'm always learning from them, and I love that. But I've never met someone that I thought was better than me, like fundamentally better as a human than me. Like I never met someone and thought I couldn't do what they do because they're superhuman. Like I've never met that person. Yeah. In fact, every time I meet these people, I go, wow, I can see how you've been so successful and you know so much about this and you're so disciplined here, and I want to learn that. But fundamentally, I've never looked at someone and thought, there's not a chance that I can learn those things, or not a chance that I can do that skill. And because of that, when I have these big dreams, these big visions and focuses, and say, well, why can't we become the world's most recognized business broadcast network? Why can't I empower 1 billion entrepreneurs? Why can't we do that stuff? Well, we can. Of course we can. Like there's nothing to stop us. The only thing stopping us is our lack of knowledge and activity. So if I'm taking the activity and taking the action, and I'm constantly learning the knowledge, of course we're going to get there.
Yeah, and how much do you, what do you think about balance? Because your meditation and things like that, it tells me that you're self-reflective.
Yeah.
And meditation's a new thing in my life, and I found,
brilliant.
Yeah, it really is. There's just you can't say it to anybody that hasn't tried it. You just have to. And for after like 2 or 3 months, you're like, wow, that's definitely a changer.
Yeah, for sure.
But I always I'm like afraid to work too much, and I don't.
Yeah, and you should be.
Yeah.
You should be. I mean, So let me touch on 2 points there then. So number one is I'm blessed that my family introduced me to meditation at a very young age. So I learned transcendental meditation and did my child's mantra when I was 11.
Cool.
And then I got my adult mantra when I was 17. So TM has been a big part of my life for well over 2 decades now. Almost 3. God, I'm showing my age. So it's been a long time, and I can always, and I mean this, I can always tell the times of my life that have gone off balance is when I've stopped meditating. Every single time, without fail. Like if I'm ever going, everything's falling apart, I don't know why, I don't know what to do, I realize I've stopped doing the things that I should be doing. I've usually done 2 things, and I've made this mistake a lot of times, which is why I now won't make them again. Number one is I become too internal focused. I just look at my business and completely forget to network with people, completely forget to build relationships and talk to people. And that will always trip me up. The second thing that I always forget is to meditate. And then it's like, oh, I haven't meditated for a while. That's why I'm off balance. That's why I'm off kilter. But I actually, I mean, we're going in a completely different direction now, but I use a lot of the spiritual intuition and spirit guides and all this kind of stuff to actually help me make decisions that have led to me being as successful as we have been. And for me, this is the tip of the iceberg. Like we're only just getting started. This is just a mere, like, this is literally the very, very tip of the iceberg. The main bulk of this baby is under the waterline. In fact, there aren't many people that even know kind of what's going on in my head when it comes to that stuff, but I know where we're going.
Yeah.
But actually, I only work 4-day weeks. I work Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday.
Yeah.
I take every Wednesday off. It's usually my reflective day, so I'll spend time with my kids. I'll play in nature. I'll meditate. I'll sleep if I need to. So that's a big one. And then the weekend is my own, usually for sports and family time. I will only work 4-day weeks, and the reason I do that is for a couple of reasons. Number one is I want to be able to give my best self to the people that I'm working with, and I can't run at 100 miles an hour 5 days a week. That's not possible. It's also that anybody who's ever worked in the corporate world will know that your favorite days were Thursday and Friday because they were closest to the weekend. They were closest to when you were getting a break, right? So I always have that feeling because Monday, Tuesday I'm working, I'm off on Wednesday. Thursday, Friday I'm working, I'm off Saturday, Sunday.
That's an interesting way to split it up, yeah.
So, and it works really nicely for me. I love it. And the biggest one I think was a real game changer for me was, and I guess I get to do this because we work globally, so it doesn't really matter what time I'm awake. I'm always working with somebody. But we do a lot of work with North America, particularly with the investment markets in North America, who want to kind of do more work with the emerging markets where we have a lot of relationships, a lot of connections, and spent a lot of time. So it didn't matter to me when I was awake. But what I have noticed is when I set an alarm to wake up in the morning, I'm one of those really annoying people who wakes up every hour to see how long I've got left to sleep.
Yeah, me too.
So I don't get a good night's sleep when I set an alarm. So now I don't set an alarm. I won't do a meeting before 11 a.m. my time. Yeah. If I wake up at 6 or 7, great. If I wake up at 10 a.m., fine. That was what my body needed. So I will just let my body sleep naturally, and I will wake up at the time that I'm supposed to wake up.
Yeah, that's I started this whole 5 a.m. club thing a while back, and they should call it the 8:30 p.m. club, because yeah, like getting up at 5:30 or 4:30. I ended up doing it at 4:30 because I needed about an hour and a half before the kids get awake. 7 p.m., 8 o'clock, I'm gone, man. Like I'm nowhere. But that's
I'm with you.
Yeah,
I'm so with you. Whereas I've heard all that stuff, and I've tried. Don't get me wrong, I've tried it as well.
Yeah.
And I'm not knocking the people who've had some success that way. Like I love the fact that people will kind of say, well, I got a good breakfast, I went to the gym, I did some reading, I got some work done, all before anybody else was awake. Yeah, it's great, but as an entrepreneur, you'll know that you push yourself harder than anybody else anyway. So at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when the rest of your team is working, you don't go home and rest because you started 4 or 5 hours before them. You just try and outpace them too. So you're getting up earlier than them and you're going to bed later than them. Well, now you're not productive at all, right? Yeah. And actually, this is kind of my problem with that whole hustle mentality.
Yeah.
It's like always be hustling. No, don't always be hustling. Understand the importance of rest, right? Rest is an incredibly important ingredient. I came from the world of sport, right? If you push yourself too hard, this is coming from a guy who got medically retired in my early 20s and should have been a professional player in the Premier League. That was where I was on course for. If you push yourself too hard, it all comes unstuck, I promise you, and it's a very painful experience, both physically and emotionally. So don't hustle, rest, hustle.
Yeah, I mean, it's true though. Like there's especially when I got started getting started in. When I was learning how to program, and you go there, and programmers they're also like, they don't care about what time, but they 60-hour weeks, and they have this whole thing. Well, Einstein never slept, and there's almost like there's this guilt part to it of like you should just be hustling, you should be working, man. You got to be, yeah, I fell into that for sure. Like I also thought that I could just stay up and burn the candle on both ends. And you're right. Like the productivity just went not the worst thing was I was just an asshole. Like I was literally just, I was just mean to people and tired all the time, and it's like
it impacts your relationships. It impacts those around you. It impacts your performance. Like all of these things are negative. And what? So that we can show off to our colleagues and say, oh, I did an 18-hour day yesterday. Anybody who ever says that to me, and my team know this very well, if you come to me and tell me you did an 18-hour day, I'm going to have a conversation with you about efficiency. Because how have you managed to spread work that should have been done in 8 or 9 hours into 18 hours? Yeah. You're clearly messing up somewhere. Like for me, my entire business, we all work flexi time. If you want to take your kids to the park in the middle of the day, then that's what you do, because the whole thing is aimed around well-being and making sure that you're as effective as possible. And you're not effective and efficient at 18 hours a day. You're just not.
How is it running? Are you mostly remote then, your team, or are you guys there?
Entirely. Yeah, entirely remote. Yeah, so we're in 6 different countries.
Yeah.
Yeah, entirely remote, dude.
Yeah.
We occasionally will need to be together for certain things. So if we're ever doing any live events, there'll be several of us together for that.
That's cool.
The team that do the television production, they're quite often together. But even so, I mean, they work remote and will come together either in like the studio or a co-working space like once or twice a week at most. But the vast majority of them will spend their time working from home. I mean, that's the joy of this today, right? Is that it's no, shocker to anybody who's still working in an office, but it's no longer the industrial revolution. You don't need to up sticks and move somewhere close to your office and go to the office to do your work. Like, I got gigabit internet at home. What do I need to go to an office for?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like there's so much of that talk since the pandemic hit, and but you were set up before that, and so.
Yeah. So we've been remote working for 6 or 7 years now.
Yeah.
In fact, up until the pandemic hit, you probably would have described my family as a nomadic family. We probably split our time between 3 or 4 countries each year. Oh. I have a habit of following the sun. I don't like winter. So every time it starts to get cold in one place, I'll go to the other hemisphere.
Yeah.
And that's worked for us, and it's led to a life that we absolutely love. But I want to stress that there's nothing special about me. Like I'm not next level. I mean, maybe Elon's an alien. I'm not.
That guy's definitely an alien.
Yeah, there's definitely something going on there, right?
Yeah.
But like, I'm not there. Like, that's not who I am. I'm just a normal person like you. Like, genuinely, I came from a single parent family on benefits. Like, we were poorer than poor. I got expelled from school at the age of 14. Like, I was destined for prison, not for success. And I just made a choice, and that choice to me was that I'm going to facilitate the lifestyle that I want, and I want to travel, but I couldn't afford to just do I'm doing my gap year in Europe. Like, no, like who was going to pay for me to do a gap year in Europe? And a gap year from what? I wasn't doing anything, right? So if I'm going to travel, I'm going to work my way around the world and travel. And that was kind of what led me to all of these amazing opportunities. And then, you do start off working in the corporate environment, and I rose very quickly to board level. And then I would kind of find myself in all these different countries. And I was thinking, like, why am I here? Like, I've been flown into France to do a meeting, and I'm going to do boardroom, hotel room, airport, back again. Like, I could have just dialed into this thing. Like, I didn't need to be here. Like, what was the point? And it was just because that was the way we'd always done business. Yeah. So what you soon start realizing is that the 2 things will happen when you start to kind of set your own boundaries. Number 1 is, can I swear?
Yeah.
Right, cool. So my wife describes it as the shit will show itself out.
Yeah.
So if you set a boundary and say, I'm not going to do this anymore. So I'm really sorry. I don't do face-to-face meetings like that. I'm not going to travel to London just to have lunch with you. We'll have lunch next time I'm there, but I'm not going to come down. So if that's going to kill the deal, we shouldn't be doing business together. Yeah. And the shit will show itself out. The people who no, we have to do business in person. It's like, well, you're not my kind of person anyway, because that's not who I am. Like, we're not going to work that way. I'm not going to be jumping in the car or on a plane every time you have a problem when I have a perfectly good cell phone and internet connection. I'm not going to do that. But then the other thing is you start to attract the other people who, like you, want to think more efficiently and start doing business in a better and more productive way. And what I found, certainly from my line of work, is that these were the people who resonated with me when it comes to things like globalization. So, you've got a couple of attitudes in business, haven't you? Which I want to dispel right away as massive mistakes that people make time and again. One of them is start pricing low with the intention of putting your pricing up at some point. Mm-hmm. I mean, that one drives me crazy because it's always easier to go down than it is to go up. Like, if you pitch your services at $20,000 and find out that your market's only prepared to pay 15 for it, fine, drop your price to 15. Now you're getting paid 15 grand. But if you're going to start selling that service at 1,000, how are you going to ever get it to 15? Right? So there's myth number 1. Myth number 2 is that I'm going to focus on one geographical area and then get that right before I start to move into other countries and other locations. Yeah, maybe during the Industrial Revolution, but not anymore, right? That's nonsense. And the reason that's nonsense is because it's riskier to do that than it is to work globally. Because if your local economy or your local market starts to tank, you're now in big trouble because you've got all your eggs in one basket. Whereas if you're working with countries all over the world and one market starts to dip, you just start putting more attention in another market. It's really that simple. So people feel like they're being risk averse by doing one location and then moving on to the next one. It's the complete opposite. It's the same logic with people with a salary, right? When you leave your corporate job and they're like, isn't it risky? You know, you're no longer getting a salary. It's like, no, I tell you what's risky, having one salary with a company that if it goes bust, you no longer have a salary and you're looking for a job alongside X amount of thousands of people who are now also out of a job. That's risky, right?
Yeah.
Me, I can have numerous clients all paying me X. If I lose one client or I fire one client, which is more likely to be the case, I'll go replace them with another one. Like for me, it's riskier to be an employee than it is to be a self-employed person or be an entrepreneur.
It's I'm trying to figure out, like, because as I listen to you, I hear this I'm trying to sniff out like your business kind of, you know. I'm listening to you talking about like you have the emerging markets and investments.
Yep.
And, right. So in the emerging markets, is that like because of the network that you've built, you have all of these other people that you've talked to, and you know that their business, what the businesses are that they're running, and you try and find the synergies? Or how is that? Like, is it kind of like you figuring out like, okay, well, this is my network here, and you investment guys want to break into this emerging market? Well, then you can exploit this market, this network that I've built through podcasting, and you, or how does that? Am I touching on it, or am I just?
It's a good question. It's certainly an element of that, but for me, it's more about where was exciting me, and where excites me is the emerging markets, because they say that necessity is the mother of all invention, right?
Sure.
And we've become lazy in the established markets. There's no two ways about it. We throw a hissy fit if the Amazon order that we did late last night hasn't turned up by 10 a.m. the next morning. We're in a position now where we can order food to be delivered and it has to come to us within an hour, otherwise we're going to be on the phone going, where's my pizza?
Correct.
Right? Like, we don't have that many problems in these markets anymore. What we do have is really highly trained people, but we don't have any problems. Whereas a lot of these, emerging markets, they still have a lot of problems, but now they have the connectivity to be able to communicate and do business with the rest of the world.
Okay.
And there's a couple of exciting things that happen there. Number one is that they can now start to sort out the problems in those locations. But it's naive to think that just because Africa now has connectivity, it only means that Africa is going to improve Africa. I know agencies that are based across Africa that only work with US-based clients. They can do a better job and for a cheaper cost than most of the firms in the US can do it for. So actually, they're not staying to their location and improving there. They're coming for you. Like this market's going to become more competitive. So if you're just going to sit back on your laurels and go, well, we're a New York-based firm, we've got 20 years experience. Yeah, good luck when the guys over in South Africa have PhDs, are better at you than your own job, and can do it at a third of the price. Like, you're in trouble, right? So you have to keep on top of that. So that excites me, because I'm definitely a David versus Goliath kind of guy, right? I like I've worked for the big corporates, I've worked for the small to medium sized businesses, and I always enjoy helping the small guy beat the big guy. That's the first thing I want to say.
Yeah.
The second thing is, you're absolutely right. Having come from a valuation surveyor's background and coming from a finance perspective, the investment community, whether that's VCs, private equity banks, funds, venture capitalists, whatever, they have a portfolio, and they have a diverse portfolio. So they'll still be investing in the established markets. Of course they will. But many of them are looking over at those emerging markets and saying, okay, what comes next? So a great example would be the best fintech banks in the world are coming out of Singapore and Malaysia. No comparison. Like, it is the best market for it. And that poses a few challenges, right? Challenge number one is, who's going to make that connection? Because whilst that fintech bank in Singapore might have aspirations of floating on the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ, they don't want a corporate loan shark who's just going to come in and give them money for a big slice of the business. They want someone who can actually facilitate that growth and that process and that transition. But who's also going to be the person that identifies that growth strategy and that map? Because, even just down to logistical things, like how you advertise in Asia is not how you advertise in the US. How you manage people in Asia is not how you manage a team in the US. So just because you have a good business in one market doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a good business in another market. There has to be lessons that are learned and things that are learned with that. Now, what I am not is the person who teaches all of that stuff. That would be ridiculous to even suggest that. What I am is the person who recognizes where those gaps and potential problems are, having worked with both of those markets extensively, and can say, great, you're going to need leadership training as to how to understand how to get the best out of the US market. You're going to need a different style marketing approach and agency. Let's go and introduce you to some people that resonate with you, usually through a podcast. Let's put you in front of 5 or 6 agencies and let's see which one you resonate with the most so that we know who we're going to be doing business with.
Yeah. And just podcasting as a tool of networking and communication. I see that now.
Yeah, dude.
That's
and do you know what the great thing about that is? That there's byproducts that come from that, right? So that's the primary reason. That's the number one reason. If you're missing that reason, I don't even know why you're doing it, is my honest answer. Yeah. But then the thing that comes from this, so let's carry on with the marketing and agency side of things, right? If you hire a marketing agency or an ad agency, their biggest complaint usually about their client is that the client doesn't create enough content for them to kind of be able to work with.
Sure.
And the client looks at them and is like, well, isn't that what I hired you for? I'm paying you like this monthly retainer every month.
Correct.
You create the content.
Dude,
right?
that's us. That's my job. Like I'm
right,
that guy. That's me saying that. You just took the words out of my mouth.
Okay, so using that analogy then, right? So you've got the two sides there that are now completely different space, right? So what ends up happening is the ad agency ends up doing their best interpretation of what they think that client's voice should be within the industry because the client isn't giving them enough to work with.
Right.
Well, if that client is off doing networking and podcasting and introducing people and meeting people to collaborate with and doing business partnerships with and all that kind of stuff, and the byproduct of that is an abundance of podcasting content that they can now give to their ad agency, that ad agency is no longer doing their interpretation of that person's voice. They're actually working with that person's voice. Okay. So even if they want to turn that into blogs and press releases and news articles and whatever, they're doing so based off that person's voice and that person's interview, which is why I say it's a byproduct, and it's a very impressive byproduct. But then the third aspect of that is, if you want to do direct outreach to people, I mean, I hate this, and I'm sure you do too, but, you know, hey, Phil, can we connect on LinkedIn? Yeah, sure. Great. Next minute, it's like, boom, here's a War and Peace style sales pitch. It's like, I've got the perfect product for you. And it's like, we've never even spoken. How can you know that you've got the perfect product for me, right? So there's two options with that person. You either warm them up and get to know them, right? But that's time consuming. And it's not very efficient either, to be completely honest. I mean, I liken it to, think back to your class in high school. You know, how many dickheads were in your class in school? 50%? Like 50% of your class were probably a douche?
At least,
right?
Yeah, right?
Yeah, okay, so at least 50%. It's about the same in the general population of the world. So if we assume that 50% of the world are people that you won't resonate with,
it's a waste
like,
of time.
why would you want to try and warm these people up and kind of see? Because at best, you're going to get 50% return, right? And that's just for someone who's not a douche. That doesn't mean they can afford you or they want to do your services or work with you at this point. So what I do is something that I like to call fishing with bait. And I've done this for years. I teach my clients to do this. 100% success record over the past 6 years is take that content that you've now built the relationship. So you've already won from it. You've given it to your marketing team or your ad agency, and they're now repurposing it. There's another thing. I'll tell you about that in a sec. But now you've done that. You're fishing, right? You've cast the net out. You see what's going to come back. So what happens next is that you want to direct outreach. So it would be something along the lines of, you know, hey, Remington, connected with you on here, brother, because your profile reminds me a lot of people that we work with and have a lot of success with. I'm not going to cold pitch you, brother, because I hate it when people do that to me. But here's a link to a podcast interview I recently did with such and such a person talking about this, this, and this. If it resonates with you, I'd love to jump on a call and learn more about you.
Yeah.
They come to you. Like, the people who resonate with you are the ones that come to you, because one of three things is going to happen there. They're either not going to listen to it, and you weren't going to have any success with them anyway. They listen to it and they don't like you, right? And they would have been the customers who would have been the headache. They would have bought your stuff because it sounds good, but, you know, they would have been a real pain in the backside. And then there's going to be the ones that listen, resonate, love it, and go, actually, I want to have a conversation with this dude.
Yeah.
And they're the people you want to be working with.
Yeah, I see that. I can see that just becoming I mean, of course you have to take a little bit of the time to be like but see, then you're searching that person out that you want to have a conversation with. So it's like, where I'm in Podmatch.
Yeah. And a Podmatch.
Yeah. And it's a great tool, but you have like, I always am just like confirm. I like everybody, let's just see what it's about. But what happens is I book my calendar out for the whole year, and I'm not really searching out my direction. I'm just kind of taking what's being given to me through the algorithm, And
I'm so with you.
Yeah. So it's
but that's the approach I call that is the kissing frogs, right? You're kissing frogs and hoping to find a prince. And how often is that going to happen?
Yeah, like it happened. But I have to say, compared to just talking to myself with Eric, it's a step up from.
Listen, I'm with you, but at the same time, imagine filling that calendar full of people who actually, you're either going to learn, earn, or have access to their network from. So every step you take is getting you closer and closer to that goal that you have.
But I'm afraid. I'm afraid to hit up somebody like that I really want to talk to. I'm actually afraid of that, which is bullshit. I know that's bullshit.
Why?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, what's the worst they can say, dude? No. Like,
seriously.
It's like, let's choose a crazy analogy, right? If you want to interview Tony Robbins on your podcast, like Tony has a team of people to stop you getting to Tony, right? So you can't just go to his team and be like, hey, I want to interview Tony, because they're going to be like, well, no. He's busy, go away, right?
Yeah.
But what you can do is interview Tony's friends. It's appear on the podcast and interview the hosts who Tony has appeared on. And now you're starting to introduce yourself to his world. So if you've done 5 or 6 interviews with his friends, you're now 5 or 6 times more likely to be able to get Tony Robbins on a podcast.
Yeah.
Because you're no longer going through his booking team. You're going to get an introduction via WhatsApp from a friend.
Yeah.
That's far more productive. A great example of that would be, I was talking to somebody about movies. I won't say who, because it's a dear friend of mine, and she's probably listening, so I love you very much.
Fair enough.
And we were talking about podcasting and movies, and we were doing this. We've got this self-development movie coming up, and I was really excited about it. And she said, I've done work with Steven Spielberg for the past 20 years. Would you like an introduction? And I was like, you're going to introduce me to Steven Spielberg to talk about podcasting and a movie? She's like, yeah, I mean, I can't guarantee he's going to work with you, but I can at least make the introduction. So she did. It was like a FaceTime thing. Just brought him in on the call. It was only a short thing, and it was like, let me know when you get to this stage and we'll have a conversation.
Yeah.
But like, can you imagine me trying to email his team being, hey, listen, I'm creating a movie and I want to chat to Steven. Is that possible? Yeah. It's like, imagine, I wouldn't even have got a response, would I?
Yeah. Do you ever have like imposter syndrome in that moment? Like, just like, where's my life at here? Like, who am I talking to?
Yeah, occasionally I'm like, okay, I am not worthy. That kind of thing. But I guess, like I said earlier, like I've never met someone that I thought was a superhuman person. I've met very successful people, but I've never met someone and thought, I'm not worthy of having a conversation with this person. Like I don't.
It's kind of a weird thing to think. You're right. Like it's more just like an insecurity of, but you're right. Like just. You make so much sense in so many levels there. So it's like I'm glad that this is recording. We're definitely going to go back on this one, not Eric.
Are we live, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we're recording, but I mean, are we live out somewhere right now?
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. I love it. So people should be writing along with this as we go, right?
Yeah.
This is exactly where we're at.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought that was clear, man. I feel bad now.
No, don't be. I love it. But this is why I'm checking out swearing before I just start swearing like a sailor, because that's what I do. But
yeah,
but I'm with you, dude. Like this is. Look, people are just humans, right?
Yeah.
They pee and poop like you.
That's what I was just gonna say. Like, exactly. Just go on the toilet.
So just have a conversation. So what's the worst that someone can say is no. And actually, here's a little trick that I'll give you, right? And here's a trick that I'll give you. And in fact, I'm going to be really cheeky. Here's a trick that I'll give you. Then I'm going to nip the restroom for like 2 minutes before we come back. I'm going to proper go Joe Rogan on you and be straight back so you can fill time for 2 minutes.
Okay.
But here's a big one, right? What you can do is, instead of asking somebody to come on your podcast, you ask them who they know that you should speak to. Okay, because what I found with that change of question, it takes it from a closed question of yes or no answer to an open question. So Remington, listen, I came across your profile, dude. Love what you're doing. Listen, I'm curious. I have a podcast that does this, this, and this. Who do you know that I should speak to about coming on as a guest? If they want to come on, they're going to go, well, me,
Yeah.
you know, worst case scenario, they're going to go, oh, actually, here's a couple of friends of mine, because they might think, oh, well, you're not really at my level yet, but they're going to introduce you to some people who they already have time and respect for to get you to that point.
Yeah.
That already changes things, because every time you ask that question, you're at least getting 1, 2, maybe even 3 introductions.
Yeah, that happened to me, but I'll let you go.
That's powerful. Yeah, let me go. I'm gonna be straight back.
All right.
You can fill time for like 2 minutes.
I'll just exactly, because that happened to us, right, Eric? Like we had that thing with we had that thing with one of our guests. Like I wrote this woman on LinkedIn. Kind of like he's saying, like I pitched her, like, I think we actually met on one of these other podcast networks, but we ended up writing in LinkedIn in the messaging there, and it was like, okay, you want to be on this podcast? And she's just like, well, she said it really politely, like I'm rebranding at the moment, right?
So like she doesn't have the time for it, and
yeah, like she's like basically saying no, but she made because I must have been polite enough that she was like, well, here, why don't you, like she kind of gave me off to one of her.
Redirected you
to a more worthy opponent, and that we're gonna have that conversation. I think it's like next week. It's plugged in there, but it's some really interesting stuff on that he's talking about, the way that, because that's the thing about this is like we
behind the scenes stuff.
I would love to talk to Tony Robbins, but I've never really thought about it as a fact of like he said, he's got a whole team of people that are trying to keep you away from him, right?
Yeah, because you're not the only one that got this idea.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's with probably every famous person.
Yeah, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a famous person. I guess it's just even like we were just talking about like Tony Robbins, it's just an example. And I had something with LinkedIn where I had that same situation, but the woman was so nice to me that she actually recommended that she give me someone else underneath her, like someone in her network that was more worthy, or opponent.
Yeah, it's getting to that level, right? But there's the other thing to be cautious of is if you're jumping around with. So let's grade people. And I know grading people is an awful thing to do, but let's just pretend everyone's a celebrity, right? You got D-listers, C-listers, B-listers, A-listers, right?
Yeah.
If your podcast is constantly jumping around between the level that you're interviewing people, what that does to people like me, for example, is that I look at that and say, he tried interviewing a couple of A-grade people, didn't enjoy it, weren't at his level, so now he's gone back down to C and D. That's his level.
Okay.
So it sends out the wrong message. It's kind of like, think about your resume. If you progressed all the way up, junior, you were intern, junior, consultant, then you were a senior, then you were a manager, then you were a director, now you go back to being a manager again, that says that you can't be a director.
Okay.
It says you weren't very good at being a director.
Yeah.
So that's why you've gone back down again. So you have to think a little bit about the kind of people that you bring onto your podcast in that kind of respect. And also, like, if you do want to start interviewing those big people and they start looking at your show and realizing that you're only ever interviewing C and D graders, why would an A grader come on in the first place?
Yeah.
Yeah. You'll have to forgive me for that. That's the first time in 10 years I've ever had to do that. In fact, that's a lie. I used to do it a lot in the sports podcast, but that's because they were like 4 or 5 hours long.
Dude, it's no problem. 2 minutes. It's you're like you said, as you literally said that, like everybody has to go to the restroom at some point, and it's like, oh, by the way,
short bathroom break. Well, do you know what? It's because earlier last year I caught COVID, and I struggled with long COVID for ages. I got pneumonia and everything. It was a real mess.
Jesus.
And ever since then, I had to cut out on caffeine. So I cut down on tea and coffee and like sugar and everything. So now I drink a lot of green tea, and I probably drink about 6-7 liters of water every single day, just normally, like flushing this nonsense out of my body.
Yeah.
But it has meant that I now have like the bladder of a child.
Yeah, it's a lot of water, bro. I mean, like
that's a lot of water. Like I feel like a hot water bottle just sloshing around the whole time.
I mean, two liters. I'm proud of myself when I get 2 liters in. But coffee
6-7 a day. Like I think at its height, I was drinking like 8 or 9 liters a day. And I don't even think that's particularly healthy. But it was like my body's just kind of got used to it now.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I love it. I get loads of energy from it. I don't get the headache I used to get from caffeine, where it was like, oh, I need a coffee. I'm starting to get a headache.
You have radiating skin, That's what water does.
That's it. I'm glowing.
No, man.
But now you see where I'm coming from, dude. It's like if that's what you want to do is if you want to meet these people, if you want to add these people to your network, you would people think about business and podcasting in a completely different way to they would think about it in normal life. And I don't get that. I never understood that. It's like, so you'd look at this and you'd say, I can't ask that person because what if they say no, right? Or, I'm just going to go straight to that person, and if they say no, then it's all done and dusted, rather than trying to do their stuff. But let's take this into a completely different setting, right? If you work in a huge, great big company, right? There's loads of people in this company, and on one of the floors, there's somebody that you really like the look of, right? This girl, guy, really doesn't matter to me, right? But you really like the look of this person. You've got a couple of choices now. You're either the kind of person who's just going to go straight up to them and go for the kill, right? Or you're going to be the kind of person who is a bit more tactical than that, and you ask around, like, whose friends do you know that know that person? How can you invite? I tell you what, can you invite your friend such and such a person out, and we'll all go out for drinks together, because then it facilitates an opportunity for me to meet this person and have a conversation with them. You're going to ask and make sure they're single.
Yeah.
You're going to do some research before, and you're going to meet the people that they know and learn about them.
Yeah.
That's what you do. That's how this stuff works. Well, why would that be any different on podcasting? Using Tony as the example. Tony, if you're listening, sorry we keep using your name, dude. I'll send you like a check for royalties or something.
Mr. Robbins.
But use Tony as an example. If you want to meet Tony Robbins, like, you don't do that by emailing info@tonyrobbins.com or whatever it is. You do that by meeting the people that Tony knows and seeing who resonates, because you're far more likely to get an introduction from a friend. And it's the same with me, right? If I get, I don't know, 100 emails a week from different PR agencies. We've got this client that wants to come on your show, wants to meet your people, blah, 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 blah. Even the TV stuff. I mean, the TV stuff is even worse. As soon as somebody finds out that you're the guy behind a TV show, you get bombarded with, I've got this person and here's why they're perfect for you. It's the LinkedIn spamming all over again, right?
Yeah.
And I'm so likely to ignore that email. It's untrue. Like, most of them go straight to spam. I don't even read them. Okay? And that's if you get my email. Then I've got my team going through the other emails accounts, so like the info at the VIP bookings emails, all this kind of stuff. Like, they'll read it, dismiss it. Most of them, like 90% of the time, they won't even come near me. If they looks like a big person, they'll come to me and be like, Phil, such and such a person's message, what do you want me to say with this? And then we'll facilitate a conversation. But let me tell you something. If somebody's introduced to me via a friend of mine or from somebody in my network, I will never ignore that message. Never. Because, like, why would I disrespect my relationship or my friendship with this person? Even if the person that they're introducing me to isn't somebody who fits into our process, or isn't somebody who, I feel is kind of, sounds awful, but kind of at the level that we should be working with, I at very least can give that person some pointers and point them in the right direction and make some introductions for them that are going to help them. And like, that's good karma. That's being a good person. That still helps somebody. Like, you don't have to interview them just because somebody asks you to. You can still make introductions to them and say, well, actually, these people will probably work better for you and help you more than mine would. Here's the introductions. Let me do it for you. But that's what I'm saying. Like, if you come via my friends and via my network, like the people that I know, like, and trust, I will have that conversation with you all day long. If you send me a cold message and spam me, you're probably going to go as a spam. So if we use that rule for most people, especially most successful people, change your approach, right? Start to map out who it is that they know, who are they friends with, who are they working with, whose show have they been on more than a few times, so there's clearly a relationship there, and then reverse engineer it. And maybe you're not ready for that. Maybe the shows that Tony Robbins is doing, you found that there's 10 podcast shows that he's done, more than twice. Dean, for example, he's done Dean's stuff millions of times, right? Or maybe you're not at Dean's level yet. Who else is Dean interviewing? Go and speak to those people. Go and start working with those people.
Yeah.
And just work your way up.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. I had this visualization of because you said about going up and then going back down. So it's like, it's just finding that curve, finding that position. Like, okay, well, I'm a D. Let's just work our way and like nice up to C and stay there for a while and kind of figure out the grounds. And I mean, it would be such a discipline to, by a fluke chance, if you got something coming from above, to be like, no, I'm not ready for it yet. That would be pretty hard, and
you know what? I mean, it comes down to you and where you're at. I mean, it may well be that person you say, do you know what? I'd love to, but we've got a 6-month running schedule at the moment. Can we pick up this interview at that point? Or can we do the interview now? I'm looking to release it in 6 to 8 months time and work up to it, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But my attitude towards this has been, you also get to see how far off that level you are when you do those types of interviews. So I'll give you the analogy that I like to use in the way that I picture it.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you're in a different country, so it should make sense to you, but it's the way that my brain works, unfortunately, or fortunately,
Okay.
one of the two. I see it as a sport, right? So using that example of like, okay, I'm at D at the moment. So D for me in terms of soccer, football, and I look at the English league, is I'm probably in League 2, right? I'm a League 2 football team if I'm a D. So what do I need to do to get out of League 2? Well, I need to surround myself with players that could be the top end of League 2 somewhere in League 1, right?
Yeah.
So that I can win some of those games and win promotion to League 1. Now I'm in League 1. My focus for the first part is not getting relegated again back down to League 2.
Right, that's
and it's
football.
about surround.
Yeah.
See what I mean?
Yeah, that's
So
football.
now it's
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
Go on.
Sorry for interrupting. I said that's football.
No,
That's
go
all I wanted to say. That's how football works. Exactly. You can go back down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, you get relegated and get promoted, right?
Yeah.
So next step is, okay, well, I've got into League 1. How do I make sure I don't get relegated, and how do I surround myself with players who are capable of challenging for the league and can do well with me in the championship? And you just keep going and keep going and keep going. And listen, let me stress this. Not every player needs to be a Premier League player. Not every team will be a Premier League team. But that's okay. Like, not every business needs to be an A-lister. That might not even be necessary for you, right? Mm-hmm. You could have a really great business in League 1. A great League 1 side. You're always there or thereabouts. You know, you're mid-table, challenging for the league from time to time. You're winning some trophies. Your fans are happy. The board's happy. Investors are happy. Players are happy. You're having a good time. You don't really want to get promoted to the championship, because if you do, you're probably going to have a season of getting your ass handed to you because you're not a championship side. You're a League 1 side. Right?
Fair enough.
Nobody wants to do that. I mean, I've seen that time and again in the Premier League. Like, I often think about this with a team. This is many years ago, but a team called Derby County. Sorry for any Derby fans that this gives horrible memories to. But Derby won the championship, and they won it at Cantor as well. Like, they did a really good job. They had a great season, and they were only beaten like once or twice all season, and they were having a really, really solid season. They came up to the Premier League, won promotion, then they came up to the Premier League full of confidence. I seem to remember like most teams beat them like 4-0. I think by the time Christmas rolled around, you already knew that they were being relegated. They literally had an entire season of wondering how many goals they were going to concede each game.
Terrible.
Like, every time they got out, they got battered.
How depressing,
right?
Yeah.
Then they went back down to the championship again, started winning games again, and loved it, and their fans were all happy again. So this is what I'm saying. Like, you don't have to go above what you need and what you're happy with. Like, if they're happy being a championship team, doing well, winning games, dominating, etc., you don't have to go up to the Premier League to get your ass handed to you.
Yeah.
So if you kind of follow that analogy within your business, it's like, okay, so where am I right now? And what businesses would I be happy with? Do I really want to work with Goldman's and Microsoft and Apple? I mean, is that even the level I want to work at? Or am I quite happy working with those small to medium-sized businesses that I can have a massive impact on, have loads of fun with, and work with them? You know, focus on becoming the go-to person for the market that you actually want to work with, rather than focusing on becoming the biggest and the best in your field, because that might not even make you happy.
Yeah, I mean, someone's got to fill the rest of the space too, and everyone wants to like this weird tendency to think that I have to be at the top. Like you said, Joe Rogan has this big, huge thing, and it's like, you know, 300 million or whatever he got for however long. It's like, yeah, okay, good for him, congratulations. Yeah. But it's like, you know, and you see that, like I watch, and you can tell there's a network of his own comedy friends, and you see like Lex Friedman, and Lex Friedman just is like, let's just say he's B level. But he's loving it there. He got 900,000 you know, followers on his YouTube channel, and he's interviewing people that I'm like, damn, I would love to interview that person, you know. And it's just there's and you know, he's having these 3-hour conversations with these jiu-jitsu masters that I've been looking up to for the last 5 years since I've gotten into it. And I don't know, I can see what you're saying. You're right. Like, and that's totally fine. I could totally be comfortable with that. You don't have to be, But I guess the tendency is just to go up and shoot for the stars and want to be the best and be at the top.
There's nothing wrong with that, though. Be the best in your market, right? We had this conversation earlier. Don't imitate other people. Don't try and be Joe Rogan. Try and be the Joe Rogan of your field, the Joe Rogan of your industry. Like, you don't have to be Joe. Like, don't try and beat him at his own game. Look, Joe has a blast with his podcast, right? Yeah. That's why it works so well. That's why it's so successful. It's so authentic. He just has fun. So, but the people that he has fun with are probably not the same people that you're going to have fun with. Not necessarily.
No.
So who are you going to learn from? Who are you going to grow from? Who are you going to have fun with? Like, that's where you need to be focusing your time and attention, right? And honestly, that's where the money is in podcasting, right? We will make $6-7 million in the next 12 months, and the vast majority of that will be done through relationships that we either have already through podcasting or are continuing to make through podcasting. And I don't sell sponsorship, and I don't sell advertising.
See, that's something that's mind-blowing to me, that you're able to do that without having to, okay, so I'm going to take off for a minute and read this ad,
but that just cheapens what I do, doesn't it? Yeah. I mean, and suddenly you lose that peer-to-peer relationship. So let's choose like some of the investment community that we work with. Like, some of these guys single-handedly are managing $500-600 million funds, right? They have, I've got one guy in particular. It's like several $1 million in a fund, like several $100 million in his fund. Ex-Wall Street guy, like 30-40 years, grew and sold an investment bank. Like, this guy went into retirement, got bored being retired, and came back out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So he's awesome, right? And we have this conversation, and he says stuff to me all the time that I just take as a huge compliment, where it's like, you're like me 30 years ago. I see so much of myself in you. And I take that as a massive compliment, because this is an extremely successful guy, right? But imagine if I just went, right, just shut up for a minute. Let me just read a message here from my sponsor. If you want to shave your head and be just as bald on top as you are downstairs, use the Male Groomer 5000. Like, no, like, I've just lost all my credibility with this guy.
Yeah.
Right? All of it. Or if he's listening to that podcast and then sharing that out with the people that he knows in his network, which is what happens, and, they're listening to these adverts and they're like, oh, I feel the same about adverts. I have the YouTube Plus account or premium account, whatever it's called, just so I can skip the adverts, right? I don't want to watch adverts every 5 minutes. Yeah. So why would I want to listen to it on a podcast? Like, if you think that the money in podcasting is in advertising and sponsorship, then you've missed the power of podcasting. Full stop.
That's definitely a unique perspective, I have to say. Like, I'm gonna do a little bit more research on you, man. I gotta check out your website. I love that you also have like this basically this profile that you just send, but it's all in there. Key facts, your bio, like it's so prepared, so it makes it so easy too, right? Like, I can just read through.
Well, that's what we do for our clients as well. I mean, it's we'll facilitate the relationships, and so that's our marketing one sheet, and then we send it across, and it will be the same for every single client we ever work with, because the aim is to kind of have this conversation as smooth and as easy access as possible, right? Like this. Let's avoid the whole 15-20 minutes of a podcast just feeling each other out and asking basic questions. So what is it you do? Tell me, why did you get into this industry? What do you like? Fine, right? But if people are going to listen to more and more of these people on podcasts, they already know all this stuff. They want to be able to dive into a conversation. They want, well, without trying to beat around the bush, they want conversations like this, where someone's going to say, Phil, I'm growing a podcast. How can I make money from it? What should I be doing with my podcast? That's the kind of questions that anybody who looks at my profile, if they got 10-15 minutes with me, that's what they want to know. It's, how did you do it and how do I do it?
Right.
That's it.
For sure. Yeah, and having that moment where it's so true, because every person that I've talked to so far, that they share it with them, but I'm thinking to myself, like, what are we going to say different than in the last 5 podcasts that this person has been in,
You're so right.
Like, and so she's just, this one person's in LinkedIn, and they share, I was on this podcast, I was on this podcast, I was on this podcast. But it's like, well, that person's just repeating themselves for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Again and again and again. So it's like, how can I, as a host, even just be like, well, let's just shake it up here. Let's just give something. Yeah. Let's talk about like something different, even though, there is just a range of what you can talk about, but trying to ask maybe a question that wasn't there before, or having that, if there's a connection, if there is like an actual heart-to-heart connection, usually those things kind of come about You know,
Definitely.
yeah. And I saw on your
Well, look, we've talked about the big goals, right? We've talked about where I want to take this in terms of the broadcasting network. I don't discuss that on 95% of the podcasts that I do.
Yeah.
Because nobody asks. They want to know about the podcasting. They want to know about how to make money. They want to understand it. Like, it also depends on which perspective people come from. Because some people come at this from I have a podcast. Let's be really selfish. Let me ask you some questions so I can understand how to make money from this. Other people come at this from look, our audience are primarily business owners. How can they use podcasting to grow their business and to do this networking piece?
Yeah.
Other people come at it from an investment perspective because they're kind of like, well, look, we want to make sure that we're making the most money out of our portfolio, and we want to make sure that we're identifying the next potential big things to come out of these different markets. How do we meet them? But it's rare that anybody kind of says to me, so where are you going with this? Like, where are you trying to take this? What they want to know is how they can take what I know already to make their life and business better. And I respect that because I get why you're asking. And that's how I got there, by asking those questions.
Yeah.
But it is rare that somebody then says to me, okay, so where is it that you're trying to take this?
Well, I appreciate you that you're sharing that. You know, I didn't know if I was overstepping my bounds there. You know, I just
no touching.
Dude,
after this long on podcast, there are no such thing as overstepping.
Right, and that's the best thing about it. Like having when someone is willing to like share these things on it and just be open, it creates so much value, right? For the people listening, they're just like, God, I never really, you know. I mean, obviously, like everybody wants to have a successful business that's making millions of dollars a year. Everybody wants that, but like there's just a million ways to do it, and like you said, like every single person is going to get there in their own way, so it's hard to map it out. But taking this podcast example, you've created a playbook for it, and like I said, like I'm thinking to myself, like in my head, I still haven't figured it out. You know, I can't just figure it out on the fly right now, like how he does it without advertising. I mean, I just haven't figured it out yet. But maybe it'll come.
The honest answer is because of the.
I'm sorry.
It's because of the business relationships, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's because
I can either charge sponsorship for an episode, right?
Yeah.
And let's say I think when we did our sports podcast, our last sports network that we sold, we were probably making about $1,200 profit per episode, and we were doing like 3 or 4 episodes a day, something like that.
Nice.
It was okay. Like I'd phased myself out of that, to be honest. So I wasn't really hosting many of those shows, if any at all. I was more guest appearing from time to time, and it was more like a radio show at that point. Like we had regular hosts that did certain slots on certain days, and that was what people expected, and that's kind of how it grew and how we sold it. But you know, we lost so much control over that. Like it's like, here's like, thank you so much for allowing us to sponsor the show. Here's a list of things you can and can't say. I mean, like a big one would be like when we started getting more US listeners, we got banned from saying the "see you next Tuesday" word, and that in the UK is like common part of our language, right? So we suddenly found ourselves in this position where one of our sponsors, I won't name them because it's harsh, they pay us a good amount of money, but they were saying, look, on average, given the length of episodes, we want you to have 7.5 swear words, no more, per episode. So we're now like counting how many times we've swore, and someone would go on a rant and they'd swear like 4 times in one speech, and we'd be like, well, that's the show's swear quota up. And that sucked. Right, that really sucked. Yeah. It was like, this is stupid. I don't like this. Yeah. And then you'd have to edit bits out that people have said that were really valuable because they swore in the middle of it, and we'd go over that quota. God, yeah. And it was like, this isn't working. Right, this isn't what I want. And that was $1,200 per episode. Right. Then we go back to like 2 weeks ago. Let's just take a real life example. I met somebody who runs a fintech bank, and they are in Southeast Asia. And they came to me and said, look, our vision is to go to the US. We want to do business in the US. We want to be on NASDAQ. Like, this is where we're going. However, we've got this conversation with this bank at the moment who've told us that we have to get to this level before they'll prepare to invest in us. And I was like, well, that to me says something completely different to what it says to you, because if they were really interested, they'd invest in you even if you were pre-profit. What they're essentially saying is, we don't trust that you've actually got the growth potential you think you have, so prove us wrong and then we'll have a conversation. I said, and that's a completely different way of looking at it. So we learned about their business. We did this whole interview with them. I was on their show. We did this whole relationship building. And then after the show, they said, look, can we pay you to do some consulting with us? Like, can you come in and do this growth stuff with us and really help us map this out? So I said, sure. Now, we had the big conversation, and it turns out that they can't actually really afford our services at this point. They can afford to pay some sort of a monthly retainer, but actually they can't really afford to kind of just say, here's the money, go and do it for us. So what we did in exchange was we did a monthly retainer plus equity. So we own a percentage of the business. So we did the whole growth strategy. Now, bear in mind, this is only 2 weeks ago, right? So we've in these 2 weeks, we've had this conversation on a podcast. We've signed them up. We've got the equity. We now own a slice of the business. I've already introduced them to 3 investment partners who are currently doing their due diligence on them that I already know. I know 2 of which are pretty 90% plus likely to invest. The third one, possibly not, because they want it exclusively, and I don't like the whole exclusively stuff. I like kind of the collaboration piece.
The David versus Goliath thing.
The risk.
Yeah.
Say again?
The David versus Goliath thing. Like having this, you're trying to help them out.
Yeah. Exactly. So, but you think about that now, right? Okay, so we're getting money from these people. They're about to get invested into. So even if I was to take my money out the second that investment's done, which I'm not going to, but even if I was to sell my shares at that point, I've already made a great profit, right? But actually, if I keep working with this business, which I'm going to, and I introduce them to the right people and they get the right funding and they end up on NASDAQ and I own, 4 or 5% of this business, that's extremely lucrative for me. So that is worth far more than the $1,200 I would have been paid by a sponsor for that episode.
Yeah.
So why would I do? It's like, why would I do that? Like, why would I cheapen the relationship by trying to aim at a sponsor or an advertiser instead? And then obviously my focus on that podcast isn't learning about them or building a relationship. It's on creating an episode that my audience will be happy with and that my sponsors would be happy with. Instead, this way, it was almost like we get to the end of the show, we press stop, and then we carry on having the conversation because we've already established at that point during the podcast that we want to do business with each other. Yeah. That's already far more lucrative for me than any sort of sponsorship or advertising deal would be. So that's how we make our money through podcasting. It's through the network. Back to what I said at the beginning. Yeah. The power of podcasting is not in the audience. It's in the networking. Meet the right people, build the right team, go and challenge for that championship, go and challenge for that title, and do so as a collective together, and you'll always be far more successful.
That's such an interesting way of looking at it, man. That's definitely a different perspective for me. Totally new. Thank you.
Good.
I appreciate
You're welcome.
Taking the time. Like, man, that's I'm gonna go over this episode probably a couple times just to try and soak it in. You know,
I can see the cogs turning.
Yeah, like it happens it's pretty easy with me. I start. Maybe they need a little bit of oil, to kind of get them rolling around a little bit. But
I like it though, man. And it's when somebody introduces you to a new way of doing it, you've got a couple of choices at this point. You either take it on board and you take some action, or you dismiss it. Right? Yeah. They're the only 2 choices that you have. But if you take it on board and you take the action, it will forever change what you're doing and how you're doing it. And the joy of this is you can still, if you want to, still monetize the audience. You can still continue to grow the audience because, look, take our podcast. We restarted it in, I want to say like February, March time last year. So it's been just over a year. We got 350,000 subscribers and 2 global radio stations that air our content. So we have an audience that we can use. We have an audience we can monetize. We have an audience we can sell sponsorship and advertising to if we really wanted to. But we grew that audience not through any paid advertising, not through any sponsorship, not through anything. It grew organically. And there's 2 ways that happened. Number one is that we're having very authentic conversations with great people. So people want to get involved and they want to hear those conversations. The other way, and this is actually probably the more fruitful way, is stuff like this. It's guest appearing on other people's shows, because there will be 2 types of listeners to this, right, that are listening to what I'm saying right now. There's the people who are going, this guy's crazy. Like, who is this guy? And they never want to hear from me ever again, right? If they see my name, they'll probably avoid that person's podcast. However, there's also the group of people that are going, this guy's onto something. Like, he's got some good ideas. It's clearly working for him. It's working for the businesses he works with. I want to learn more. And they're going to do 2 things. They're going to go check out my podcast and go subscribe because they're going to want to know the people that I know. They're going to want to learn what I'm learning. And they're going to want to go check out things like Podchaser and things like that to go and see which other episodes I'm appearing on, who else I'm talking to, so that they can go and learn some more stuff. But that's how you grow your podcast network. You appear on other people's shows and the audience follows you. Yeah. Now, use that as an analogy, right? And I use this analogy all the time. Are you going to be able to grow your audience and get more sales faster by starting your own exhibition or being a keynote speaker at already established and existing exhibition?
That's a really good metaphor. Yeah. Obvious. It's an obvious one.
Yeah. I mean, but then people kind of go, I started my podcast so I can get more sales. And it's like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, your podcast is not about sales. Your podcasting is about networking and learning. Other people's podcasts are about networking and sales and credibility, but mainly networking and sales. Your podcast is about learning, because the role of a guest and the role of a host are two completely different things, right?
Right.
Your role as a guest is to add value. That's why you're there. You're here to give golden nuggets, to showcase what you can do, to kind of give people that advice. So if they want to come and do business with you, they can. Your role as a host is to extract those golden nuggets from your guest and create some content that you're learning from and that your audience can learn from. That's not going to get you sales, not directly anyway, because if you're getting sales from your own podcast, you're probably, as in like in this style podcast,
right,
it probably means you're talking too much about yourself and not enough about the audience, not enough about the guest.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I mean, especially as a host, right? Like, and even Joe will go, like, Joe's people, they know that he's doing that. Like, they'll interview him in his podcast, right? Because he's that guy that people want to hear from him, you know.
Yes.
But it's a different established thing, like we talked about before, and you're right. Like, I found that there was a moment when we were trying to, like, we didn't have any guests and I was just doing it by myself and I was just talking the whole time, you know, and it's like, what am I doing here? You know, like, I would try and create an episode or whatever and try and have something to talk about or read out of a book, or, you know, but I felt like it's way more, first off, like, for me at this level, it's great to be a host. Cause like you said, I'm learning, I'm doing it. But the next step would be to have so much going on, such a value, like my own attached value to my opinions and to what I'm thinking, that I can bring them with me as a guest on another show. Right. So, but I mean, like I said, for me right now, having you on here is so easy, right? You're so flowy and you have your train of thought. You can go and you branch off into different topics. You can take any kind of garbage that come out of my mouth, you can kind of just turn it around and give me a little nugget there, you know, and that's a gift. That's a skill that 10,000 hours. You said it yourself, right? I mean,
yeah, dude, that's a lot of podcasting, right? Yeah. And they weren't all nice hours of podcasting either. So thank you for the compliment. I mean, you know, podcasting, when I first started podcasting, you know, it was completely different to today. I mean, like, today we got clever tools for editing. You know, we were doing this on Skype on one audio file, and you would always have that one dude breathing like Darth Vader the whole time. You know, and then you'd have people that don't understand mic etiquette. So they would realize that they wouldn't realize that they need to mute to talk to somebody else. So they'd just whisper. So like halfway through you saying something, they'd be like, "Can you make me a cup of tea? Yeah, do we still have any of those hobnobs left? Yeah, just bring some of them." And it's like, what? It's like, dude, we can hear you. It's like, oh, sorry, dude. Does anybody want any hobnobs? It's like, but you kind of just have to run with that and have fun, right? Yeah. But it was also the fact that if I ever invited a guest onto a show, now we're going back like 12 years ago now, something like that. If you invite someone onto a show, especially a business owner, they used to behave like you were inviting them in for a police interrogation, right? It'd be like, who are you? Why do you want to know this? Do you work with the IRS? And it's like, no, I'm not some sort of clever auditor, dude. Like, I'm trying to learn about your business. I don't give a toss what your tax returns say. I want to learn about you and your business. Whereas now, as you said, like, you invite someone onto a podcast, 9 times out of 10, they're flattered to be asked. So they're going to say yes. And that's where you need to keep making sure that you're always leveling up and you've got that strategy there. In fact, let's do this as a little exercise before we go. All right. Because I think if we use some tangible examples, it will help you and it should help other people. What do you do as a business? Where do you make your money from at the moment? What's your skill set? What do you do?
As a marketing agency.
Okay. So this one's even easier then.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so the type of clients that you work with. So talk to me about, you know, don't talk to me about the name of the client, but talk to me about the type of business that if they come across your door, you're going to go, yes, I can help them. They're going to love me. It's going to be amazing. What does that business look like?
Well, I'm pretty local here in this little province, so I'm pretty any small business, sole proprietorship type of business. So those are the businesses that I have clients those are my clients here locally. So
Is that who you want to work with?
It's more.
That's a no.
It's a no. I just don't want to say it so loud.
No. Listen, but that's okay. Like, because you can say that online because look, they're lucky to have you working with that market. But the fact that you have aspirations to work bigger and better, that shouldn't upset them. If anything, that should excite them that they already have a pre-existing relationship with somebody who's already going to get bigger and better. So that's not a negative. That's a positive. Okay, so let's say you want to stop working with just the smaller businesses and you want to start working with some of these, let's say, mid-sized agencies or mid-sized businesses, right? So you want to go from people, I mean, I'm not even talking like a massive leap here. I'm talking, we want to go from businesses that employ less than 10 people to businesses that employ 50 to 100 people. They're going to have a bigger budget. They're still going to be decision maker based, so you don't have to go through board meetings and all that kind of nonsense to get there, right? So what you want to do is build a relationship with those people. So what you do is you make a list of your existing clients and you look at the sectors that they are currently in. Then using something like SalesNav on LinkedIn, you would create a list of businesses that are doing the same thing as them in the same niche, in the same market, but at that larger size, 50 to 100.
Right.
Now you start to invite their CEOs and CMOs and everybody else onto a podcast to talk about their business, to talk about what they do, to talk about how it is they're helping people and what the challenges are and what the successes are, and just have this conversation with them. Talk to them about their background and their history and their experience. You're not selling them anything. That's not why they're here.
They're there to talk about their business. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah. So you're here to do two things with them, right? Thing number one is you want to learn what's going on in the mind of your ideal client, because that's invaluable information, right? If you want to be working with that mid-sized market, that 50 to 100 space, what better way of doing that than to understand what's currently going on in the mind of the CEO and the CMO, right? You need to understand what challenges they're going through, what's exciting them, what opportunities are coming up that they want to grab with both hands. What's keeping them awake at night? Because if you can start to understand that, what you then get to do is be able to go, oh, actually, I can't solve that bit and that bit, but this bit I really can. Like, I know how to do that bit. Yeah. So now you start to tailor your message because you know that they're experiencing this, this, and this, and that you have the solution for it. So that's now going to tailor your whole marketing approach and the way that you discuss this with clients, okay? The second thing you're going to do is see whether you resonate with them, because just because you can help somebody doesn't mean that you should. Okay, you're going to see who you resonate with and who you like, and you're going to be, the aim of this is to get to the point where you want to work with people that you resonate with, not just with them directly, but following the rule of 6, where 6 people know 6 other people like them. They will also know the other businesses in their space. They will also know businesses that are having a similar problem, so there's 2 ways of doing that. At the end of a podcast interview, when you're finished and you're off air, if you've resonated with somebody, say to them, like, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Like, I hope you're feeling it too, but I really feel like we vibe together here. Yeah. Now, listen, I do this, and this as a business. If there's ever an opportunity to do something, you should hook me up, man. We should shout about this. This is definitely something I'd be interested in. Plus you can ask the most valuable question. Thank you for being on the show. Who else do you know that I should be speaking to about this? Who else do you think would make a good guest for me?
Yeah, to just keep that.
You're getting more introductions, more referrals, and every time you speak to someone, it leads to another 3 or 4 more. It doesn't take long before you've got your entire industry mapped out. Now, here's the clever thing. That direct outreach piece I told you about before, where you've kind of made that top list of the top 20?
Yeah.
You only need to get one of them, and then you can start to use their name to open up the other ones. And I don't mean in like a sleazy kind of, hey, they said I should call you when they haven't kind of way.
Yeah.
I mean in a, hey, Remington, we connected on here, dude. Your profile reminds me of some people that I'm working really well with. In fact, I recently did a podcast interview with such and such a person. Don't know if you know them. Check out the interview. If it vibes with you, then I'd love to jump on a call and learn more about what you do. Because now what you've done is you've got borrowed credibility from the fact that they do know this person, and they know this person, right? You've also got the fact that if they resonate with you still, they're going to get in touch with you. But now you're tapping into a third piece, which is the keeping up with the Joneses piece. Nobody ever wants you to be working with their competitor when they've never even heard of you. You're going to get a call just because they want to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So if that's how you grow your marketing agency, literally take that step, listen back to this podcast, take those steps, start mapping out those businesses, apply the strategy I told you before, and before you know it, you will have the handful of clients within that small market where you're working at the moment with those solopreneurs and those smaller businesses. You'll stick with the ones that you love. You'll stick with the ones that you really want to work with. The ones who you're currently just working with, and I'm not going to ask you to admit this because they might be listening, but the ones who you're currently working with just because they pay your invoice, but actually you're not really that bothered about working with them, you've outgrown them and you can now move to the next level. But now what you're doing is you have a nice mix of the medium-sized ones that you were aspiring to work with and the solopreneurs that you enjoy and love working with. And you keep doing that. That's now you're in, right? So using the analogy we used before, you've now just been promoted from League 2 to League 1. Now you need to start surrounding yourself with players who are capable of challenging for League 1 and taking you into the championship.
Bro, and you say you don't drink coffee. Like, I can't imagine what you used to be like when you did drink coffee. Like, you're going, man. I love it. Like, you got me. I'm this motivated here, right, Eric? Aren't you feeling it? It's just like, thank you, man. Thank you for
You're
just,
most welcome, brother.
for just opening up and sharing all that. That's just very, but it's like, it's doing it, right? Like, how many people just like, but you got to do it, and
you have to take the action. Somebody once told me a quote, and I've held it very dear to me ever since, which is, the universe rewards action, not thought.
Right. True that, man. Just do it. Do the steps. And I love this whole thing about being like, when you have that connection with somebody. Like, I've done that. I've done the opposite in my life, and every time I regret it. Like, when you're like, oh, I don't really care for this person, but let's just do this anyway, and you just it always turns around on you. It's like, why?
They're always the pain in the ass, right? They're always the one that gives you the biggest headache every single time. It's always the client that you've done the discount for, or you didn't get a great feeling, but you just thought it's just going to be a small project. I'll just do it to get some cash in the bank. It's always them that ends up being a massive pain in the backside. But what I genuinely believe is that that's life testing you a lot of the time, because as soon as you get the discipline to start saying no to those people, more of the right people start to show up, because the universe has been like, oh, good, right, he gets it now. He gets that he shouldn't just be filling his time with these people, so let's give him people he should be filling his time with. And you end up working with people that you just love working with. Like, I mean what I say. I love what we do, and I love who we do it for.
It shows, man. It shows. And this on that note, let's just say goodbye, if that's cool with you.
It sure is, brother.
Yeah,
it sure is. I really enjoyed this. Thank you for having me. It's been great to be here.
Yeah.
Hope the audience have taken a lot away from it. Like, as you said, it's about taking the action, right? It's about getting on with it. How many people have an entire bookshelf full of these self-help business books, and they'll still buy the next one that comes out because they read it, like what it says, and then don't take the action.
Tony Robbins.
Like, dude. You got to stop looking for the silver bullet. Just get on with it. Take the action. Find your way. There's plenty of stuff out there. For most people, you already have all the pieces of the jigsaw in place. You just can't be bothered putting them together.
Yeah. True words. All right, man. Phil Pelucha.
Thanks so much for having me, brother.
Man.
It's been great to be here.
All right.